So, you're wandering in the wasteland and you get something in your eye. What are you gonna do? Goggles. Up at Spirit, because I wanted them for a Star Wars OC, but they seem way more Fallout for me. So we're going to take these and using simple paints that you can get at Walmart, Michael's, Joann's, anywhere, and simple brushes, we're going to weather these bad boys up and make them look like they've lived in the apocalypse, and you can too. And as usual, I am using plaid paints on this. I'm only using one of the effects, and the rest are just regular acrylics from their lines. There you can see some googly eyes and super glue, and what I'm doing is I'm using those to create faux rivets to hold the goggles to the leather. It looks a little bit like they're stitched on there, but I figure you want them to be pretty secure and held on. So rivets would sell the job of looking like someone put them together and repaired them a couple of times. Here I'm taking my razor and I am just cutting in little scratches, nicks, and dings. I want this to be weathered up and look like they've seen years and years of abuse in the apocalypse and in the wilderness and out in the world. And you can also use this for non-Fallout things. This could be for airsoft. I don't know the rating, but I mean, the imagination is really your limit. Here I'm using a rat tail file, and then I switched to 40 grit sandpaper. This stuff is rough, and it did a great job of scuffing up the material, the faux leather that they're using there. And then I went back in with rat tail and just poked a couple of holes, used the knife to cut a couple of holes that I'll fix up later. Now I'm taking my Leatherman folding tool and using the file on there and scratching up the glass and making a mess. Using a matte black paint to just go over those rivets and make a little bit of a mess to leave a shadow around them where they possibly picked up grime, and that'll show through the paint scheme a little bit later. Right here I'm using Plaid's Folk Art Metallic Antique Copper to go over all these golden bits and make them look like hammered antique copper. I'm being very messy with the brush and just layering it on. Some of it's thicker, some of it's thinner, and I actually let it dry a little bit and then go back over it again with another pass of the brush, loaded up with paint just to layer it on. It almost gives that hammered effect without having to get the spray paint out and using that. I'm doing one eye at a time, and I'm not being real careful about getting any of it on the thread because that's going to get covered. So once it's dry, I took some of the Folk Art acrylic patina paint, and I'm going over all the areas where moisture would have collected if these things had been maybe left out in the rain, or you're walking through that acidic, horrible nuclear rain in the wasteland and just causes a patina to develop, especially if you don't clean it right. And honestly, you don't want to polish your glasses in the apocalypse. You've got other things to worry about, like rad roaches and crazy killers and other raiders and those pesky vault dwellers that keep seeming to emerge from the bottom of the waste. Here I'm going back in and just adding a little bit more to make it have some more depth and hitting some of the high spots where the patina maybe didn't rub away, where it hasn't been scraped off, banging around in a bag, getting taken off at night when you go to lay down for sleep, and just really getting into areas where I think that it would build up. And I'm really liking the way it looks, so I'm going to start moving on in just a second. Now I'm switching to matte black, and I'm going to go with a very fine tipped brush over all those threads on these goggles, and this was painstaking, but I really enjoyed it. I kind of got to zone out and watch a couple of things on YouTube, check out other content creators, and think of how I wanted to make this character look. And you'll see as I go along, in a couple of spots I actually put some black paint down into the holes where the thread goes just to add a little bit more dirt, depth, and shadow. Right here I'm finishing up and going around and making sure that I've hit the points that I wanted to, and I'm also using water and some more of that black matte paint to make a wash to go over the patina, to go over some of the high spots on the goggles and just add layers of grime. And then you're going to see me here switching to a raw sienna and using that water and just creating another wash and going over certain areas where I think there'd be buildup, and also putting some of it on the leather to add some aging and character depth to the materials. Worn, and here I'm just taking a paper towel to soften up some of that, and then I'm switching to a nutmeg brown, and I'm going in again on the leather adding some of it and getting it in around the corners of the goggles where if you wiped off your face real quick, maybe you wouldn't reach. Using it kind of like a mud almost and going around and just dabbing it all over the place, adding water to some spots, adding some more of that raw sienna, and making a couple of blended colors. Now I'm taking some hockey grip tape or athletic tape and just putting it around where the goggles meet, because again, we're creating a layer here, we're creating another point of interest on these goggles that otherwise would just have a regular little elastic strap. Of course, this gets weathered as well with a brown raw sienna and nutmeg brown mix up, a little bit of black in there too that I picked up through the paper towel with water, and it just adds more character and again more depth to this, because you don't want it to be just one tone. When things get weathered, layers build up, and that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just building up layers of grime on this elastic. And I'm also noticing this plastic buckle here, and I've decided that I kind of want it to look metal, so I'm getting some of the metallic antique copper from Folk Arts Heritage Coverage Collection, and just going over and brushing it on there. It's the same color that was on the front of it, but I liked it on the black, and so it adds a different appearance, because when there's black underneath versus some shiny gold, it's going to catch light differently and just adds another piece of interest to these. And I really just went in and dry brushed it on a couple of times over top of itself and gave it a little bit of depth. Made sure I hit the high points on the top and on the bottom and the sides so it gets full coverage. Now, taking a look at it, everything looks good. I turn it over, I turn it to the side, and just verify that things are where I want it. And I go to consider using my gloss apple barrel paint, but I decide, no, I think I'm going to use something different. So I go and get my Plaid Effects paint, but before I put the Plaid Effects on, I'm using just a little bit of piece of jute twine to cut some simple little sections and make fake stitching over the areas that I tore on these. And I'm using my Leatherman to cut the ends off. It's a neat little effect, and again, I'm adding interest to the final prop. It's another layer. It looks like somebody went back and fixed it, and super glue works well, and it also picks up some of the weathering from underneath and gives another layer. And just using the back end of a paintbrush to not only glue it in, but also tuck it underneath the lenses. So now everything's looking good, and I'm taking a little bit of Mod Podge and just muddying up and softening those lenses, because you don't want them reflecting too much light, especially something that is that old. If you ever take a look at headlights, even 5 or 6 years old, after the sand and the elements and everything bounces off them, they look rough. So I grabbed the Plaid FX paint, one of their reds, I believe that's the closer to crimson color, and I just went on here and started to add fake blood. Added spatters here and there, similar to the way that I did with my axe. And as you can see, I'm really happy with where it is. I didn't go crazy over the lenses, because you want to be able to see out, and hopefully you didn't get any splatter on there. Now I'm softening it up with a paper towel, and I also use a paintbrush with a little tiny bit, a small amount of black on it, just to, again, soften that red color and make it appear as though it's blood that's fresh, but not too terribly fresh. And now they're done. I love them. They came out great, and they look like they've seen some shit. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you're doing for Halloween, or if you're working on something Fallout related. And as always, if you're not subscribed, please do so. Be well, guys. Too sweet me.